The wheels of my suitcase squeaked like a warning I didn't want to hear, echoing down the long corridor of Terminal C while the announcement overhead kept calling for flights I wasn't on. I stood there, clutching my boarding pass in one hand and my phone in the other, the screen dark because the battery had died somewhere over Nebraska. My daughter-in-law Lisa had promised to wait. She'd promised. And yet the crowd thinned, the fluorescent lights buzzed louder in the emptiness, and I realized I was alone. I can still taste the metallic tang of panic at the back of my throat, the way it mixed with the stale airport coffee I'd nursed for the last hour. My knees ached from the flight, my hip giving its familiar twinge, and the only thing keeping me upright was the stubborn pride that had carried me through worse. But pride doesn't call a cab, and pride doesn't explain why the person you trusted most just vanished. Let me take you back to before any of this, before the suitcase wheels and the empty gate and the Thanksgiving that changed everything. My name is Evelyn Harper, but most folks just call me Evie. I'm 67, widowed these past 8 years, and I've spent the better part of my life trying to keep my little corner of the world stitched together with love and Sunday roasts. My house sits on a quiet cul-de-sac in Maple Ridge, the kind of street where kids still ride bikes without helmets and neighbors wave over picket fences. The kitchen smells like whatever's simmering on the stove, usually chicken soup when someone's sick, apple crisp when someone's celebrating. I like order. I like knowing the people I love are safe. My son, Michael, is the center of that world. He's 35 now, tall like his father was, with the same crooked smile that could talk me into extra cookies when he was 10. He's a high school history teacher, coaches the JV soccer team, and still calls me every Sunday night at 7 sharp. When he met Lisa 6 years ago, I thought the sun had finally come out after a long storm. She was bright, literally, with that blonde hair always twisted up in a clip, and quick to laugh. She worked in marketing, traveled for conferences, brought home stories that made our dinner table feel bigger than our little town. The first time she called me Mom, I nearly dropped the gravy boat. They married in our backyard under the maple tree that turns fire red every fall. I wore lavender because Lisa said it brought out my eyes. Michael cried when he saw her walking down the aisle we'd made from leftover Christmas lights. I pressed my handkerchief into his hand and told him, "That's your future, son. Treat it gentle." Lisa squeezed my arm and whispered, "We're so lucky to have you, Evie." I believed her. Life settled into a rhythm I could hum along with. Tuesday mornings, I'd drive to their house with a casserole because Lisa claimed she couldn't boil water without setting off the smoke alarm. Michael would kiss my cheek, smelling like chalk dust and coffee, and Lisa would hug me too long, like she was afraid I'd disappear. I'd watch them from the doorway, her head on his shoulder while he graded papers, the dog circling their feet, and I'd think, this is what I prayed for when I tucked him in at night. We took vacations together, the 3 of us. Last year we rented a cabin in the Smokies. I woke before dawn to make biscuits, and Lisa patted in wearing Michael's old sweatshirt, hair in a messy knot. She leaned against the counter and said, "You know, Evie, I never had a mom who cooked like this." I told her blood doesn't make family, love does. She smiled, but there was something fleeting behind her eyes, like a bird darting past a window. I chalked it up to city girl nerves. The first real crack appeared small, the way all cracks do. It was a Tuesday in early October, the air crisp enough to smell wood smoke from someone's chimney. I'd driven over with pumpkin bread still warm in the tin. Lisa's car was in the driveway, but the house felt quiet in a way that prickled my skin. I knocked, used my key when no one answered. The kitchen counter held 2 coffee cups, both half full, both cold. Michael's briefcase sat by the door like he'd meant to grab it and forgotten. Upstairs, I heard the shower running. I called out, "It's just me with treats." The water shut off. Lisa appeared at the top of the stairs in a robe, hair dripping, cheeks flushed like she'd been running. "Evie!" I wasn't expecting you." Her voice was too bright, the way people talk when they're hiding a sneeze. She came down slowly, cinching the belt tighter. "Michael's at school. Parent-teacher conferences." I nodded, set the bread on the counter. "Thought I'd surprise you both." She kept smiling, but her eyes flicked to the hallway behind her. I noticed her phone on the island, screen lit with a text preview I couldn't read from where I stood. Something about it made my stomach dip, the same way it did when Michael was little and I found matches in his pocket. She poured me coffee I didn't want, talked fast about work, about a new campaign, about anything except why the house felt like it was holding its breath. When I left, she hugged me at the door and said, "Drive safe, Mom." But her arms were stiff and the pumpkin bread sat untouched on the counter. I told myself I was being silly. Lisa was busy. Michael was busy. The world spun faster than it used to. Still, I started noticing little things. How Lisa's laugh came a beat too late when Michael told a story. How she'd check her phone under the table at dinner, thumb moving in quick, guilty swipes. How Michael's eyes followed her sometimes with a question he never asked out loud. Then came the trip. My sister Marlene in Arizona had taken a fall, broken hip, surgery, the works. Michael couldn't get away with midterms coming, but he insisted I go. "Lisa will drive you to the airport," he said, kissing my forehead. "She's got that early meeting in the city anyway. Perfect timing." Lisa smiled, bright as ever. "Of course, Evie. I'll take care of you." The morning we left, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of November drizzle that seeps into your bones. Michael carried my suitcase to Lisa's SUV, hugged me hard. "Call me when you land." Lisa buckled me in like I was made of glass, adjusted the heat so my feet wouldn't get cold. She smelled like vanilla and something sharper. Nervous energy, maybe. We chatted about Marlene, about Thanksgiving plans, about the new grandson my niece was expecting. Normal talk. Safe talk, traffic crawled. Lisa's fingers drummed the steering wheel. At the terminal, she pulled to the curb, popped the trunk. "I'll help you inside," she said, but her phone buzzed and her whole body tensed. She glanced at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "Actually, Evie, they're strict about curbside now. You'll be fine, right?" "Gates just through security," I hesitated. My hip was stiff from the drive and the suitcase felt heavier than when Michael lifted it. But her eyes were pleading, and I didn't want to be the difficult mother-in-law. "Of course, honey. You go on," she hugged me quick, lips brushing my cheek. "Text me when you're through security." Then she was gone, taillights disappearing into the snarl of airport traffic. I stood there with my suitcase and my dead phone and the first cold finger of doubt tracing my spine. Security took forever. By the time I reached the gate, my flight was boarding. No text from Lisa, no missed calls once I found a charging station. I told myself she was stuck in traffic, that her meeting ran long. I boarded, settled into my window seat, and watched the runway lights blur through rain-streaked glass. Marlene's surgery went well. I stayed a week, sleeping on her couch, pureeing soup, holding her hand while she cried about getting old. Every night I charged my phone, waiting for the flurry of apologies I was sure would come. They didn't. Lisa sent one text on day 3. "Hope Aunt Em is okay. Busy week." That was it. I flew home on a Tuesday, the same drizzle greeting me. Michael picked me up, arms full of apologies he didn't understand yet. "Lisa said she dropped you right at the door." "Said you insisted?" His brow furrowed. "Mom, why didn't you call me?" My mouth went dry. I looked at my son, my honest, exhausted boy, and something inside me cracked open like thin ice. Lisa had lied. Not a little white lie, but a deliberate, sharp-edged one. And the worst part? She'd left me stranded, hip aching, phone dead, in a sea of strangers. That night, I sat at my own kitchen table with a cup of chamomile gone cold. The house was too quiet. I kept seeing Lisa's face in the rearview mirror, the way her eyes flicked to her phone instead of to me. I kept hearing Michael's confusion. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel the full weight of being disposable. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away. Lisa always hosted now. Her open-concept kitchen, her aesthetic charcuterie boards, her need to prove she was the perfect wife. Michael had already asked if I'd bring my pecan pie. I said yes, of course. But as I stared at the dark window, reflection staring back, I felt something shift. Not anger, not yet. Just a calm, steady resolve. She wanted to play hostess? Fine, I'd bring more than pie. The days after I got home blurred together like watercolor left in the rain. Michael kept asking why I was quiet, why I flinched when Lisa's name came up. I told him jet lag, told him Marlene's hip had me worried, told him anything that would keep the truth from spilling out too soon. I needed time. I needed the right moment. And I needed Lisa to think everything was fine. She called on Thursday, voice syrupy with concern. "Evie, I'm so sorry I missed your pickup. Work exploded, client emergency, you know how it is." I could hear her tapping acrylic nails on her phone, the same nervous rhythm she'd had in the car. "Michael said you looked tired. Are you feeling okay?" I closed my eyes. Pictured her standing in that perfect kitchen with the marble island and the pendant lights she'd chosen because they were on trend. I pictured the way she'd smiled at me while lying to my son. "I'm right as rain, honey," I said, calm as Sunday morning. "Just need a good night's sleep." She exhaled, relieved. "Good, because Thanksgiving's at our place, and I'm counting on your pecan pie. Michael says it's the only dessert that matters." She laughed, and I laughed with her, the sound brittle in my throat. I started planning the way I used to plan Christmas when Michael was small. Lists tucked in my recipe box. Ingredients bought in secret, every detail measured twice. Only this time the recipe wasn't for pie. First, I needed proof. Not suspicion. Proof. I'd spent enough years trusting people's faces to know smiles could lie. So I did something I'd never done before. I borrowed my neighbor Donna's spare key to Michael and Lisa's house. Donna thought I was watering plants while they were at a soccer tournament. She didn't ask questions. She'd known me 40 years and trusted my word the way I used to trust Lisa's. Saturday morning, the house smelled like Lisa's lavender diffuser and the lemon cleaner she was obsessed with. I moved quiet, slippers soft on the hardwood. Michael's briefcase was in the office, papers stacked neat. Lisa's laptop sat closed on the kitchen island, a post-it with passwords stuck to the side, birthdays, anniversaries, the dog's name spelled backward. People are careless when they think no one's looking. I opened her email. My hands shook, but I made them steady. There, in the sent folder, was a chain with someone named Jay Carter. Not a client. Not a coworker. The messages started casual. Lunch to discuss branding, then drinks to celebrate a win. Then can't stop thinking about last night? Same hotel? Lisa's reply. Michael's mom is in AZ till Tuesday. I'll say I'm in Chicago. My stomach turned, but I kept reading. Hotel receipts. A calendar invite blocked out in pink. Personal day. A selfie. Lisa in a silk robe, hair tousled, lips painted red she never wore at home. The timestamp was the morning she'd left me at the airport. I printed everything. The printer in Michael's office whirred like an accusation. I folded the pages small, tucked them into the lining of my purse where the pecan pie recipe usually lived. Then I wiped the browser history, closed the laptop exactly as I'd found it, and left a note on the counter. Plants watered. Love, Mom. Driving home, the sky was the color of dishwater. I pulled over at the park where Michael used to play t-ball, sat on the same bench where I'd bandaged his knees. The wind carried the smell of wet leaves and distant barbecue. I cried then. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that tasted like salt and betrayal. I cried for my son who deserved better. I cried for the girl I'd thought Lisa was. And I cried for the part of me that had wanted so badly to be wrong. But crying doesn't fix anything. Planning does. Thanksgiving crept closer. Lisa texted group messages about centerpieces and whether cranberry sauce should be jellied or whole berry. I responded with thumbs-up emojis and offers to bring extra folding chairs. Michael called to ask if I'd make my cornbread dressing. Lisa's trying a new recipe, but it's not the same, he said, voice low like he was confessing. I could hear her in the background, singing off-key to whatever played on her phone. I'll bring the dressing, I told him. And the pie. The night before Thanksgiving, I baked. The kitchen filled with the smell of toasted pecans and brown sugar, the crust flaky and golden. I made 2 pies, one for the table, one for later. Into the second crust, I pressed a tiny envelope sealed tight. Inside were the printed emails, folded small as communion wafers. I covered it with caramelized nuts and a lattice top so perfect no one would suspect. Then I wrapped both pies in foil, labeled them with sticky notes, table and fridge, Thanksgiving. Dawn broke cold and bright. I wore my good wool skirt and the pearl brooch my mother gave me when Michael was born. Michael picked me up at 10, eyes bloodshot from grading papers late. Lisa's been up since 5, he said, rubbing his neck. Place looks like a magazine. It did. White pumpkins lined the porch steps. Twinkle lights draped the banister. Inside, the table stretched long enough for 12, Lisa's parents, Michael's cousin from Denver, a few work friends who didn't have anywhere to go. The air smelled like sage and rosemary, and the faint chemical tang of whatever Lisa used to make the silverware gleam. Lisa hugged me at the door, cheeks flushed from the oven. Evie, you're here! She took the foil-wrapped pies, fingers brushing mine. I saved you a seat at the head. Best view of the chaos! She laughed, but her eyes flicked to my face, searching. I smiled, warm as pie. The day unfolded like a play I'd rehearsed in my head. Kids ran underfoot. Lisa's father told the same golf story he told every year. Michael carved the turkey with the electric knife, tongue between his teeth the way he did when he was 8. I passed the dressing, the green beans with almonds, the cranberry relish I'd made from scratch because Lisa's came from a can. Conversation flowed, safe topics, work gripes, Black Friday plans. Lisa floated from guest to guest, refilling wine, checking the gravy. She wore an apron that said, "Kiss the cook" in red cursive. Every time she leaned over Michael, he touched her waist like he was anchoring himself. I waited. Patience is a muscle. Mine had been exercised for weeks. Dessert came after the plates were cleared and the coffee brewed. Lisa brought out the first pie, the one labeled table. "Evie's famous pecan," she announced, setting it in the center like a crown. Cameras flashed. Someone made a toast to family. I smiled, nodded, let the moment stretch, then I stood. The room quieted the way it does when an elder speaks. "Before we dig in," I said, voice steady, "I have a little something extra." I reached for the second pie, the one from the fridge. Lisa's brow furrowed, just a flicker. "This one's special," I continued. "Made it with a secret ingredient." I set it down, peeled back the foil. The lattice was perfect, the nuts glossy. But when I lifted the top crust with the pie server, the envelope slid out onto the tablecloth, crisp and white against the amber filling. Lisa froze. Michael's fork clattered. The room held its breath. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Lisa, honey," I said, gentle as a lullaby, "why don't you read it aloud? It's addressed to the family." Her hand shook as she opened the envelope. The email spilled out, printed in black and white, dates and times and hotel names glowing like accusations. She scanned the first page, color draining from her face. "Evie, this is private?" I finished. "Funny. So was abandoning your mother-in-law at the airport with a dead phone and a bad hip. So was lying to my son about where you were that morning." Michael stood slowly, chair scraping. "Mom," I met his eyes. "Read them, Michael. Out loud if you want. Or don't. But your wife's been keeping secrets, and I think it's time the table knew what kind of pie we're really eating." Lisa's mother gasped. Her father's face went red. The work friends shifted uncomfortably. One of the kids asked if this was a game. Lisa tried to laugh. It came out strangled. "This is a misunderstanding." "Evie's confused." "I'm many things," I said, "but confused isn't one." "I trusted you, Lisa. I called you daughter. And you left me stranded because you were too busy with Jay Carter." I let the name hang in the air like smoke. Michael took the pages with hands that weren't steady. His eyes moved over the words, and I watched the boy I'd raised turn into a man who just had his heart cracked open in front of 12 people. When he looked at Lisa, it wasn't anger yet. It was worse. It was disbelief. The room erupted then. Questions, denials, someone's wine glass tipping over. Lisa's voice rose, shrill and desperate. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." I sat back down, folded my hands in my lap. The pie sat between us, cooling, the envelope open like a wound. The silence that followed wasn't the soft kind that settles after a prayer. It was sharp, jagged, the kind that slices through small talk and leaves everyone bleeding. Lisa's mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin that had "Give Thanks" printed in gold foil. Her father stared at the tablecloth like it might offer answers. Michael stood frozen, the emails trembling in his grip, the words on the page louder than any shouting could ever be. I stayed seated. My coffee had gone cold, but I lifted the cup anyway, letting the rim touch my lips so I wouldn't have to speak yet. I'd said what needed saying. The rest wasn't mine to carry. Lisa tried to gather the pages, her manicured fingers fumbling. "This is private," she hissed, voice cracking. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said, calm as the eye of a storm. "You made it my business the moment you left me stranded in that airport, lying to my son while you were off with another man. You don't get to decide what's private when you hurt the people who love you." Michael finally moved. He didn't look at her. He looked at me, eyes glassy, the same way they'd been when he was 6 and his goldfish died. "Mom, how long have you known?" "Long enough to bake 2 pies," I said softly. "Long enough to decide whether to protect you from the truth or protect you with it." Lisa's work friend, a woman with a sleek bob and a glass of Pinot she hadn't touched in 10 minutes, cleared her throat. "Maybe we should give you some space." She stood, chair legs scraping, and the others followed like sheep sensing a storm. Lisa's parents tried to protest, but her father's face had gone the color of turkey gravy left too long on the stove. They gathered coats, mumbled about traffic, and slipped out the front door with the haste of people escaping a fire. The kids, Michael's cousins' two little ones, had been whisked to the den with pie and cartoons. The dog whined from behind the baby gate. And then it was just the three of us. Me at the head of the table, Michael halfway out of his chair, and Lisa standing by the island like she might bolt. She didn't. She sank onto a stool, apron still tied, and buried her face in her hands. The sound she made wasn't a sob. It was smaller, defeated. Michael looked at the emails again, then at her. "Jay Carter," he said, voice flat. "The guy from the Chicago conference? The one you said was just a colleague?" Lisa didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth sat between them like the ruined pie, sticky and undeniable. I pushed my chair back. The legs sounded too loud in the quiet. "I'm going to check on the children," I said. "You two need to talk. Really talk. Not the kind where you smooth things over with smiles and excuses." I left them there. In the den, the TV played some animated movie with singing reindeer. The little ones were half asleep on the couch, pie crumbs on their shirts. I sat on the ottoman, smoothed a curl from the girl's forehead, and let the sound of their breathing steady me. Children don't know yet how fragile trust is. I envied them that. Behind the closed door, voices rose and fell. Lisa's first pleading, then angry. Michael's low broken. A glass shattered. I didn't flinch. Some things have to break before they can be put back together. An hour later, Michael came in. His tie was gone, shirt untucked, eyes red-rimmed. He knelt in front of me like he used to when he needed forgiveness for tracking mud in the house. "She's packing a bag," he said. "Staying at her sister's tonight," I nodded. "And tomorrow?" He rubbed a hand over his face. "I don't know, Mom. I keep seeing her face in that photo. Keep hearing her tell me she was in meetings while—" His voice cracked. "How do you forgive that?" "You don't," I said. "Not right away. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a road you walk, one step at a time. But you start by deciding whether love is worth the work." He leaned his head against my knee. I rested my hand on his hair, the same way I had when he had nightmares. "I thought she was my future," he whispered. "She still could be," I said. "Or she couldn't. That's not my call. But you deserve the truth, Michael, all of it. And you deserve to choose what comes next with your eyes wide open." Lisa appeared in the doorway then, overnight bag slung over her shoulder, face blotchy and bare of makeup. She looked smaller without the armor of her smile. "I'm sorry, Evie," she said, voice hoarse. "I don't expect you to believe me, but I am." I looked at her for a long moment. "Sorry doesn't undo the airport. Or the lies. Or the way you looked at my son like he was a habit you could break. But it's a start. If you mean it," she nodded, tears spilling. Then she looked at Michael. "I'll call you tomorrow." He didn't answer. She left, the door clicking shut behind her like the period at the end of a sentence neither of them had meant to write. The house felt too big after that. Michael and I cleaned in silence, scraping plates, wrapping leftovers, wiping down the island where the pie had sat like evidence. When the last dish was dried, he hugged me hard, the way he did after his father's funeral. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said into my shoulder. "You'd figure it out," I told him. "But you don't have to. Not tonight." I drove home under a sky full of stars, the road quiet except for the hum of my old Buick. My house welcomed me with the faint scent of cinnamon from the morning's coffee. I hung my coat, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the kitchen a long time, staring at the pecan pie recipe taped inside the cabinet door. The one my mother had written in her careful cursive. "Trust is the sugar that holds it all together," she'd added at the bottom. "Leave it out and everything falls apart." I made tea. Chamomile, no sugar. Sat at the table with the light low, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself feel the full weight of what I'd done. Not triumph, not vindication. Just a bone-deep sadness that the family I'd tried so hard to build had cracked right down the middle. But cracks let light in, too. The next morning, Michael called at 7. "I didn't sleep," he said. "But I'm coming over. I need my mom." I put the kettle on. By the time he arrived, I had bacon sizzling and biscuits in the oven. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. We ate in silence at first, the only sound the scrape of forks and the tick of the kitchen clock. Then he said, "She wants to come talk. With both of us." Says she'll tell us everything. I buttered a biscuit, broke it in half. Steam curled between us. You ready for that? No, he admitted. But I think I need to be. I nodded. Then we'll be ready together. Lisa came that afternoon. She wore no makeup, hair in a simple ponytail, the kind of vulnerable that can't be faked. She brought a box of my Tupperware she'd found in her cupboard. Washed, stacked, a small gesture of respect. We sat in my living room, the same couch where Michael had learned to tie his shoes. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, dust motes dancing like tiny witnesses. She started talking before either of us prompted her. About the loneliness of travel. About how Jay Carter listened when Michael was buried in grading. About how one drink became two, became a hotel key, became a habit she couldn't quit. She cried without theatrics, just steady tears that left tracks on her cheeks. I thought I could keep it separate, she said. Like it wasn't real if it wasn't here. But it was real. And it hurt you both. I see that now. Michael listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked only one question. Do you love him? Lisa looked at her hands. I love the way he made me feel. But no, not the way I love you. Not even close. I didn't speak until the silence stretched thin. Then I said, love isn't just a feeling, Lisa. It's a choice. Every day. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard, she nodded. I know I've broken your trust. I don't know how to earn it back. But I want to try. If you'll let me, Michael looked at me. I looked at him. This wasn't my marriage to fix. But it was my family. And family, I'd learned long ago, is less about blood and more about who shows up when the pie burns. We'll try, Michael said finally. But not here, not yet. You stay with your sister. We'll go to counseling. And Lisa? His voice hardened just a fraction. No more secrets. Not one, she agreed. When she left, she hugged me, hesitant, like she wasn't sure she had the right. I let her. Because grace isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing I know. Part 4 of the script, 1,000 words. The weeks after that Saturday blurred into a strange new rhythm. Michael came over most evenings after school, tie loosened, shoulders carrying the weight of questions he hadn't known to ask before. We'd sit at my kitchen table with mugs of decaf and the radio tuned low to the oldies station. He didn't talk much at first, just stared into his coffee like it might spell out the future. I didn't push. I'd learned long ago that silence can be a kind of holding, too. Lisa stayed with her sister in the city. She texted Michael every morning, simple things. Made it to work. Thinking of you. No emojis, no excuses. He showed me once, thumb hovering over the screen like he wasn't sure whether to reply. I told him, answer when you're ready. Not before. He nodded, slipped the phone back in his pocket. Counseling started the first week of December. Michael picked a therapist whose office smelled like lavender and eucalyptus, the kind of place that tries to soothe you before you even sit down. He came out of the first session looking wrung out, eyes puffy, but he said, she asked me what I wanted our marriage to look like in 5 years. I didn't have an answer. I told him that was okay. Answers don't come gift-wrapped. I kept busy the way widows do, baking for the church sale, wrapping gifts for the toy drive, hemming curtains for Donna next door. But every night I sat in my rocker with a quilt over my knees and thought about the airport. Not with anger anymore. With something quieter. Grief, maybe. For the version of Lisa I'd loved like a daughter. For the ease we'd all lost. One afternoon, Michael brought me a tin of homemade fudge. Lisa made it, he said, setting it on the counter like it might explode. Said it's your mother's recipe. The one you gave her the first Christmas? I lifted the lid. The fudge was cut into perfect squares, dusted with powdered sugar. I took a piece, let it melt on my tongue, bittersweet the way fudge should be. She remembered the vanilla extract, I said. Michael managed a small smile. Progress, I thought. Small but real. Christmas came soft and strange. We didn't do the big gathering at their house. Instead, Michael and I put up my little tree, the one with the crooked star his father had carved the year Michael was born. We strung popcorn while Bing Crosby crooned about white Christmases. Lisa came Christmas Eve, tentative in the doorway with a poinsettia and a bottle of the spiced cider I like. She wore no makeup, hair tucked behind her ears. She looked like the girl who'd first walked into my kitchen 6 years ago, nervous and eager to please. We drank cider by the fire. Michael sat between us on the couch, close enough that his knee touched mine. Lisa didn't try to fill the silence with chatter. When it was time for gifts, she handed me a small box wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a tiny maple leaf charm. "For the tree in your backyard," she said, voice barely above the crackle of the logs. "The one we got married under." I fastened it around my neck. The metal was cool against my collarbone. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. She stayed for dinner, ham and scalloped potatoes the way my mother made them. We didn't talk about the emails or the airport or Jay Carter. We talked about the dog's new trick, about Michael's students putting on a play about the Boston Tea Party. Normal talk. Safe talk. But underneath it, something was shifting, like ice thawing slow enough not to crack. After she left, Michael washed dishes while I dried. "She's trying," he said, scrubbing a pan with more force than needed. I see it. But some nights I still smell that hotel on her, even though she wasn't here. I folded the towel, hung it neat on the rack. Trust is like a garden, son. You don't plant seeds and walk away. You water every day, pull the weeds, pray the frost holds off. Some years the harvest is thin. Some years it's bountiful. You don't get to decide which until you've done the work. He nodded, eyes on the suds. "I'm scared to let her come home." "Then don't," I said. "Not yet. Let her earn the key. One day at a time." January brought snow, thick, muffling flakes that turned the cul-de-sac into a postcard. Michael shoveled my walk without being asked. Lisa started coming to Sunday dinner, bringing grocery bags and staying to help cook. She learned my cornbread dressing recipe by heart, measured the sage with the same careful pinch I used. One night, she burned the rolls and laughed, really laughed, while Michael scraped charcoal into the trash. I watched them from the doorway, her head thrown back, his hand steady on her back, and felt something loosen in my chest. Counseling continued. Michael told me the therapist had them writing letters, to each other, to their younger selves, to the marriage they thought they'd have. He read me one in the car on the way to the hardware store. It was about the first time he saw Lisa cry, at their wedding, when the officiant said, "In sickness and in health." He'd thought it was joy. Turns out it was fear. Fear of failing. Fear of not being enough. Lisa's letter, he said, was about the airport. About how she'd seen my suitcase in the rear view and felt a surge of guilt so strong she'd almost turned around. But her phone buzzed, Jay Carter saying he was waiting, and she kept driving. She wrote that she hated herself for it. That she'd do anything to take it back. Anything, it turned out, included moving back into the guest room. Not their bedroom, not yet. Michael told me the night she asked, voice steady but eyes pleading. I said yes, he said. But I changed the Wi-Fi password, and I took her phone at night. She didn't fight me, I didn't cheer, I didn't warn. I just made a pot of chicken soup and left it on their porch with a note, for the nights when words aren't enough. Spring came early that year. The maple in my backyard budded red, then green. Michael and Lisa started walking the dog together after dinner, their shadows long against the sidewalk. One Sunday, Lisa showed up alone with a flat of pansies. "For your window boxes," she said. "I remember you saying purple was your mother's favorite. We planted them side by side, dirt under our nails, the sun warm on our backs." When we finished, she brushed soil from her hands and said, "I quit my job. The traveling one. Took something local?" "No more hotels," I nodded. "Good," she hesitated. "I know you may never forgive me, Evie, for the airport, for all of it. But I want you to know I'm trying to be the person you thought I was." I looked at her then. Really looked. The lines around her eyes were deeper. Her smile didn't come as quick. But it was real when it came. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said. "Forgiveness isn't for you, honey. It's for me. So I can sleep at night. But trust? That's different. That you're earning. And you're doing all right," she cried then, quiet tears that soaked into the dirt. I pulled her into a hug, felt her tremble against me like a child. Over her shoulder, I saw Michael watching from the driveway, hands in his pockets, hope flickering in his eyes like a candle someone forgot to snuff out. That night, I baked pecan pie. Just one. I didn't hide anything in the crust. When I brought it to their house the next Sunday, Lisa cut the first slice and handed it to Michael. He took a bite, closed his eyes. "Just like Mom's," he said. Lisa smiled. Small, careful. I watched her make it 100 times. We ate in the kitchen, the three of us, the dog begging for crumbs. The pie was sweet, the nuts toasted just right. And for the first time in months, the silence between bites felt like peace. Healing isn't a destination. It's a direction. And we were walking it, one slice at a time. I still wear that little maple leaf necklace Lisa gave me. It catches the light when I'm stirring soup or folding laundry, a quiet reminder that some things bend before they break. Michael and Lisa moved her things back into their bedroom last month. They leave the guest room made up now, just in case someone needs it. They say the word trust a lot these days, like a prayer they're still learning the tune to. I learned something in that long winter and slow spring. Revenge isn't the opposite of love. Indifference is. What I served at Thanksgiving wasn't vengeance. It was truth with the lights turned all the way up. Sometimes love looks like letting the pie cool on the table while everybody stares at what's inside. Sometimes it looks like planting pansies side by side with the person who hurt you. Both are necessary. Both are hard. Family isn't the people who never wound you. It's the people willing to sit in the wreckage and pass the broom. Michael and Lisa are sweeping still. Some nights they call me at 10 o'clock, voices overlapping, asking how much sage goes in the dressing. I smile into the phone and tell them muscle memory will teach them. Love is muscle memory, too. So I'll ask you the same question I ask myself when I touch that silver leaf at my throat. When someone you love leaves you at the gate, do you lock the door forever? Or do you leave the porch light on and see who walks back? There's no shame in either answer. There's only the life you build from the one you're given. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think of your own table, your own pie, your own quiet betrayals, tell me in the comments. Would you have baked 2 pies? Would you have opened the envelope? Or would you have driven back to the airport and tried again? Hit that subscribe button if you believe second chances are earned, not owed. And ring the bell so you don't miss the next voice from Auntie May, because every family has a story, and every story deserves to be heard. Until next time, keep the faith, keep the light on, and keep the sugar in the trust. Take care now.